Dear friends, this is Gregory Vaughn Palmer coming to you again with another edition of Faith and Works. And as I've previously tried to say, these are conversations to stir us up to good works and to love based upon the word in the book of James, faith without works is dead. I'm pleased today to welcome a friend and a colleague, Bishop Bill McAlilly, who is serving as the Bishop of the Nashville area, which includes the Tennessee Annual Conference and the Memphis Annual Conference that is in process of becoming a new annual conference. And have you named it yet, Bishop?
We have the Tennessee Western Kentucky Conference, because we've got a little piece of Kentucky out on the western edge of Paducah, 5 counties of Kentucky.
Yeah. Used to think about Paducah a lot when I was in Illinois Great Rivers, because when I got down to the Ohio River, I could see over into Paducah. So, yeah. Well, that sounds great. Well, listen, I've invited Bishop McAlilly to join us to tell us a little bit about himself. And we do some good work together in the Council of Bishops. And I admire his spirit and his work and appreciate his friendship. He's not just a work partner, but a great guy that I can hang out with when we're together at other things. And recently, he was a key part of a letter that was written by the bishops of the Southeast jurisdiction of our church that decried the racial climate and injustice in our nation and in the world. And I wanted to ask him how they reached that point and some of the provocative things that they said and how that can help us on to be in a church. But Bishop McAlilly, first tell us a little bit, just background us on who Bill McAlilly is.
Well, I'm the son of a Methodist preacher. My father was ordained the day I was born, June 8, 1956. And he had to leave annual conference and hitchhike to Tupelo, where my mother was, and get back in time that evening so he could be ordained. So he did.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I'm a product of the parsonage and the church, and my life has been steeped in the Wesleyan roots over time. I'm from Mississippi, which is an interesting place to be from right now as they struggle with whether or not to hang on to the Confederate flag yet again. So a lot of history there that we're not all that very proud of. One of the interesting parts of my time in Mississippi when I of course went to Millsaps College, our church school there in Mississippi, and then on to Candler School of Theology. And when I came back to Mississippi, I served an associate role, and then I was sent to the Mississippi Delta, very small town in the northern part of the Delta, one of the poorest counties in the state. And I learned a lot about the culture of what had been a place where slavery was alive and well, and how far and deep and wide that shadow was still cast, how much poverty was in that area, and yet how blind our white congregation was to that poverty. There's a story that I could circle back to later of how a church I served, my last full church appointment, Tupelo First, ended up going back to that very county and helped partner with a black congregation in that county to do significant work with the people of Quitman County. So that was really a great full circle story for us. But I also served First Church Philadelphia, Mississippi, not
the one in the background here?
Not the one you're from, not your Philadelphia. But that was the place where the 3 civil rights workers were buried in the dam.
That's right.
And so I have a little bit of that history in my life and the stories that were told. There was a woman who was a member of the church there. She was up in years, but she had been the person in the community that connected with the FBI during the investigation, and she linked to the black community. And she ran, of all things, the sale barn where cattle were sold. And the farmers ran her out of business because she was a liaison. She wrote a book called Witness in Philadelphia, which was a very truth-telling book. And when I read it, I said, "Oh my, these people are members of my church." And it was a very interesting season of my life. But I would say, growing up in the parsonage, growing up with my father, who was very instrumental in leadership in the North Mississippi Conference back before they were merged. But he was a player, if you will. He was a significant voice in the merger of the Upper Mississippi Conference, the old Central Conference, annual conference in Mississippi, and the North Mississippi Conference. You may know the name of Israel Rucker. Does that name ring a bell?
It does.
Israel, and my father ended up being on the appointed cabinet. Israel for the Upper Mississippi Conference and my dad for North Mississippi, and they stood on the stage together and held hands on that day that we finally came across the finish line on that. But let me back up. When Dad was in seminary at Emory, Israel was in seminary at Gammon, and Israel had a car, and my daddy didn't. And Daddy was serving a student appointment in Mississippi, and he would hitchhike home every weekend, and Israel would pick him up hitchhiking and bring him to Tupelo, Mississippi on the weekends. So now think about this. This is 1955, 1954, driving across rural Alabama on 2-lane roads, a black man and a white man. And Daddy would put a big Emory sticker on his suitcase so he would be identifiable as an okay guy, Mm-hmm. But he and their friendship started then, and it remained throughout their lives over the years. So that's a part of my family tradition, my family history. And then Merlin Conaway. I don't know if you ever knew Merlin.
I knew Merlin.
Merlin and Dad were on the cabinet together, and I remember the first year Dad was on the cabinet, 1969. Merlin and his family came and sat at table in our home, and that was the role model that my father bequeathed his children, was to be a bridge builder and build relationships. So,
man, thanks for sharing that autobiographical stuff. So that leads to another question before we get to the letter. You really have grown up with a significant consciousness about the racialized history of America.
Yes.
And you grew up in one geography, et cetera. So you and I are both baby boomers and kind of in the middle of the boom. So when you were a little kid or an adolescent, did you envision we'd be having some of the conversations in 2020 about race that we are having right now? Or did you believe we'd be a lot further down the road?
Oh, I certainly thought we'd be a lot further down the road. I remember 7th grade was when we were desegregated in our hometown, and the black kids came over and joined us in junior high. And I had been the starting point guard for the 6th grade basketball game. And in the 7th grade, I didn't make the team. Well, I said, I see how this is going to work. We were so glad to have the black athletes come to our school because now we were a winning team. We were good. They had a lot of value to our win-loss. And those guys remain friends to this day.
To this day. Wow. So you still, being a part of DSEG, you still have relationships with white and black students that you went to junior high and high school with. That's fabulous. Well, so when you think about that, you didn't think we'd be having the conversations that we are having, and as a 7th grader or as a high school senior or a freshman at Millsaps, what did you dream 2020 or envision 2020 would be like in terms of race relations in America?
I thought that we would find our way to equality. I thought that the job market would be leveled. I thought that education would be enhanced for all people. My wife's a school teacher, and she taught in Native American school in her early years of teaching, and then in the public school system. And we've been very committed. She has since we've been in this work toward Project Transformation, where we tutor children in the summers. And so we just thought that we would be further along than we are, that we certainly would not be having the kinds of conversations we're having this summer and dealing with the racial strife that's among us. It saddens me in a deep place in my heart that the rhetoric of racism has raised its ugly head, and that I'm still learning. I'm learning. My black colleagues on my cabinet and the Council and College of Bishops are teaching me what it means to be privileged, and I continue to be a learner in that way, and trying to articulate some of that to our white brothers and sisters in our conferences is proving to be a little bit challenging at times.
So that's really how I lured you into this conversation. And, I saw you and I talked on the phone about the letter that you and the colleagues in the Southeast put out, and you were a principal part of the writing team. And talk about what you hoped you would communicate there as a college of bishops, and what some of the responses have been, good and bad.
Sure. Well, Leonard Fairley is our bishop in Kentucky. Leonard's a black bishop, as you know, and I'm not sure the whole church knows Leonard, but he's a humble and faithful spiritual leader. And he called the college together very soon after George Floyd was murdered, and he said, "I feel very strongly we need to make a statement, and as a college, we need to speak into this moment." And he said, "I'd really like some of our white bishops to be a part of the writing team." And so he didn't get a lot of response on that call. And that very same day, I had spoken with two of my black district superintendents who happened to be female, and they had spoken with me about the anguish they were feeling and the fear they were feeling for their adult sons, who are men of stature, so to speak. They were, not small people, and how they might be intimidating to someone, and they could imagine a worst case scenario that could happen to them. And so I took those conversations coupled with the conversation at college, and that Tuesday night I had a restless night. I could not sleep, and when I did finally fall asleep, I was awakened at 3:30 with a burning in my spirit that I needed to try to write something. And so I began to put some words on a piece of paper, and I began to think about the ways in which I needed to show up and see. Gregory Ellison, you remember Gregory came and led the council, and the way he begins his workshop, "I want to see you." Mm-hmm. You remember that? And I had actually preached a sermon at our spiritual life retreat in our conference the previous February when he was with our pastors. And so the "I want to see you" image has stuck with me over this time. And so I began to use that phrase, show up, see you and be with you, began to resonate, sort of a poetic kind of refrain in my mind. And sort of started trying to write about that, and thinking about where I personally, and this was very personal for me, frankly. It was not, I wasn't speaking about anybody else's sin at that point, but my own failure. And I wanted to be very confessional, what I was writing. And that kind of came out of my spirit, where I had failed where I'd been silent, frankly, over the years, and not spoken up and led and been a person that would have been more of an advocate than I have been. And so I shared that with Leonard. I sent it to him at 5:00 that morning, and Leonard called me at 6:30 And of
He
course,
knew you were up.
it was 7:30 in Kentucky, but it was 6:30 in Tennessee. And so we began to talk about how to move forward with that. So I shared it. I said, do I have your permission to share this with the group, with the college? And so we sent it out. And we began to go back and forth, as you know, these wordsmithers in the council like to do. We like to help people with their writing.
Yeah, yes. We're all
improve
teachers there.
Yes. And so we hit on the idea that Leonard would write an introduction, and this white bishop piece would be in the middle, and then he would give a conclusion. And as originally we thought it would be something that just, the white bishop piece would be the white bishop's signatures. But then we finally concluded that the best way to go would be for everybody to agree to the whole document. And we frankly got all but one of our retired bishops. Every bishop retired and effective as the language goes, signed on except one, which I was very, we were thankful for. And then we sent it out. And so out of that, had a lot of affirmation, particularly among our Black leaders in the conference. And yet there have been some people who don't understand, some white folks who don't understand the language of white privilege. There are people who I think would be on the lower spectrum of middle class, perhaps, and lower, who don't see themselves as persons of privilege. And so they think about it only in terms of economics, I think. And I think that's a piece that's an educational moment for me, in the sense that I have to be more clear in language when we speak of privilege. And so I continue to be in conversation with my Black leaders. I'm doing Zoom calls with all of my Black leaders now, and I'm learning what that means to them. How they see white privilege. And, as Leonard would say, have you ever been followed when you go into a Walmart? Has somebody ever stood by you while you're checking out at the electronic checkout? Those kind, we don't, one of my pastors said, why do people hate me just because of the color of my skin?
Yeah.
And so it's been a very sobering season. For me personally.
It is, yeah.
And, my heart breaks. One of my prophetic female white pastors was at the Capitol last night protesting a vote that had taken place in the legislature the day before, where a Black female young woman had been murdered. And the legislature was trying to honor her name, and it was voted down. And she was escorted out because she was praying the Lord's Prayer too loudly, which is, she wasn't shouting racist language or calling anybody a racist. She was just praying, and that was apparently not acceptable. So these are just the strangest of times.
They really are. And the privilege thing has many dimensions. It's economic, but it's also the visual and visceral response that people have to other people and groups of people. And it's do people end up like George Floyd? How many of our Anglo men and women who are accused of passing a bad bill or check have ended up dead on the other end of that? And
sure.
Tell you a little funny thing about me. I've talked about this in West Ohio, but to West Ohio, I tell you again, if I go even into a CVS or a small store like that, and you know how it's become popular to ask, do you want a receipt? We're trying to save trees and all of that. Do you want a bag? I might say no if I only bought a pack of gum because I could put it in my pocket. I always ask for the receipt because I assume if there's a question that I'm not going to get the same benefit of the doubt. I'm going to be 66 this year, and that tape of my parents is still that you got to not only reach the bar, you got to exceed it. So I was talking with a young Anglo clerk at the CVS in my neighborhood, Bill, and I'd bought, it might have been a quart of milk and one other item, could have easily walked out the store to my car, which wasn't 50 yards away. And he said, do you want a bag? And you know, they're required to ask you, do you want a bag? And I said, absolutely, I do. And he kind of looked at me like, dude, he didn't say this, but dude, you only have, you know, this. And he didn't give me an ecological speech on waste. He just looked at me. And I said, you seem puzzled that I want a bag. And so I took a risk, didn't want him to feel threatened at all. And I said, I assume you go to high school in town here. And he said, I do, sir. And I said, well, it's been my experience over time and the way in which I was raised that you don't walk out of a store with product with no bag. It's an invitation to get stopped by somebody with the accusation that you stole it. And so the bag creates a barrier. The receipt creates proof. So at 66 years old, I'm probably still wasting paper in a plastic bag. It seems like a simple example, but it's an example of the privilege, the experience of privilege. I just take it for granted. I don't go home and weep about it. I just say, you're darn tootin'. I'm going to contribute to making a healthier environment, but it won't be under threat that I walked out of a store with something that I didn't pay for when actually I did. So those are the little tapes that play. And when you talk about the moms in your cabinet who are worried for their sons and what have you.
We can I just interject?
Yeah, no, please, come on.
In January, I had the two of them lead the cabinet in a racial culturalization of our team to help us understand the whole racism dynamic as they see it in the church. And it was a beautiful time. And you know, before the day was over, our cabinet was weeping in the stories that they tell. You know, you gotta, when the police come, hold your hands up. You know, when you get stopped, hold your hands up. Don't reach for the glove compartment, all those sorts of things. And you know, I didn't have to teach my kids that. You know, I told them to be respectful.
Yes,
but,
yes, yeah.
But you know, just that one little that bit, that's it right there in a nutshell. It's that one thing. And so it's been I'm so thankful we did that in January. Yeah.
So some of the I've been listening to some of the learnings that people are having, just the people that I'm around in West Ohio, and we've done some things at annual conference that have teased out these conversations, and the number of Anglo sisters and brothers who, just as you were saying, Bishop, who when they would hear a Black parent, and particularly a Black mother, but not only, say, you know, I had to have the talk with my son or my daughter. And the number of them that said, what's the talk? So it's now becoming more common in knowledge that in many families, and I would say Black and brown, and there may be, you know, I'm not saying it's isolated to that, but the community I know best is the community I know best. To this day, I don't know of households where that talk doesn't take place. And while my son and daughter are right at 40, you know, when we had the talk years ago, but when something happens in the city where they live that is racialized, Cynthia and I can't sleep for a night. and we're calling them like they're still the teenagers that broke curfew, and we're saying, are you all right? And they're almost 40 years old, because we're just not confident that they're going to get the same break, even if they did all the right things. And
one of, you know, just last week, one of the sons of one of my DSs, he's got dreads, and he got stopped in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
And just because, you know what, he had dreads.
Yeah.
And, you know, you got, you know, everything checked out. But,
Yeah.
you know, sent a shiver down his mother's spine when she heard that.
Yeah.
You know, just crazy. It's just, it's basically not fair.
It's not. And I want to say we have many wonderful people in policing. And, but there are enough that have hidden bias or maybe have an agenda that it's making it hard for the good ones to stand out. And so I hope there will be some public policy changes as well. What are the one or two things that only the church can do that if we would do would make a difference?
A big question. Well, you know, I've thought a lot about that question the last couple of weeks, really. It's really the one question that I keep asking myself. And what I'm most certain about is that we got to provide opportunities for people to get to know each other like you and I have got to know each other. You know, by the grace of God, you and I ended up in a place at the same time where we were thrown together around a common vision, a common hope, and we built a relationship. And we discovered some things about each other that we really, you know, kind of like. You know, we share a lot
absolutely.
Yeah. You know, we share a lot of the same philosophies and sense of humor, and we like to joke, and you know, all of those things. That's not about color. You know, it has nothing to do with what color our skin is. It has something to do with the spirit of a person. And you know, what I've reflected on. I'm going to get to your question, but part of my reflection around this is how many of the people from my small hometown have had the opportunity to be in a relationship with a person of color like I have had a day-to-day working relationship with persons of color like I have had. And I think it's that simple. It's how do we create space for people to come to know each other as human persons, as human beings, who the spirit of a person, and remove some of those other barriers. I think that's what the church can do. You know, back in the day, you know, we used to have pulpit swaps. Remember those days? We don't need any more. We don't need any more pulpit swaps. That's not the answer. No. What is the answer is getting around a table and eating a meal together, or rolling up your sleeve and go do hurricane recovery together. You know, do a mission team. I'm working on an idea right now. I've started these calls with my African American pastor, my black pastors, Zoom calls. I'm doing about 8 or 10 at a time. Not all pastors, some late. It's a mix, but I've got, you know, I've got 2 conferences, so I'm blending the 2 conferences so that we're trying to use this another opportunity to build relationships across conference lines. But my second round will be that I'll have 4 Anglo white pastors, leaders, and 4 black leaders on a call together around, you know, how to be anti-racist or study a book together. But again, and have a leader from each race, and simply, you know, over time to build that relation. So I'm just thinking how, you know, you can do that on Zoom. No one has to go anywhere. Zoom may become a real bridge builder for us that we hadn't imagined previously. I
love it. Yeah.
So those are kind of some of the things I think the church can do. I think, you know, we've done some design thinking with our young pastors in Tennessee and Memphis. And one of the tools of the design thinking is an empathy map. And how do you help a person have empathy for another person? And I think we would do well in our churches, particularly with lay people, to have a small group of black and white leaders together, black and white parishioners together, and just do the empathy map experience. Let me tell you my story. And I think, you know, I don't know if you've ever been to Ireland, but in Northern Ireland, there's a town there called, inside the city walls, it's Derry, and outside the city walls, it's called Londonderry. And for years and years and years, the wall separated these two groups of people who could not stand each other. In the 70s, when the strife was so thick there with the Protestants and Catholics, some young people started coming into the city from the outside the city walls and meeting with young people inside the city walls and around art. They were working on our art project. And when we toured there was a plaque outside that building where they met that said, "First, there is conversation. First, there's conversation." And what this moment is doing for us right now is we've just got a lot of shouting and a lot of uproar. And part of it's just out of the sheer anger of Black people who just had all they can take with COVID, and now this pandemic around racism and Black lives being taken unnecessarily. And so there's a lot of rage that's totally understandable. But at some point, we've got to get to a conversation and a story. I want to know your story. You need to know my story. And when we know each other's, I mean, that's basically what Jesus did, right? He sat with people around a table, and he came to know them. They came to know him. So that's my answer right now. What's yours?
That's a great question. I do believe that it is in the storytelling. That's a little bit of why I shared the one piece about, how I move in and out of a retail establishment. And in fact, as I was getting ready to give an address to the conference in the last few weeks, a woman that's in a part of a group of other women, lay women that talk about issues and books and all, said, "Bishop, we would love to hear more of your story." And so I want to say I concur. I've invited some small groups because I'm just testing it. It's an experiment. Then I might expand it, gathering some people around doing theological reflection around the roots of racism in America, but I think they go beyond America. And there's some good material out there, not for the faint of heart, but excellent material. And it's sort of not, it's not about beating up. It's like, oh my gosh, how did we get this way? And what are the assumptions that we just took for granted theologically that didn't send up the caution sign for how we do relationships across lines of difference, race, and it could be other things, gender, socioeconomics. So I've got one pastor doing that with some invited colleagues and another geography outside of Columbus, but in our conference. I've started one here in this area. And so to those of you in West Ohio that hear me saying this and say, "Hey, you haven't invited me yet," just hold on. We're testing the idea, guys, and making sure we got a plan. So that's a way. And I don't see this as only for clergy. So let me underscore that. And I believe I've got one thing here where I've invited some lay people to begin to do that. And we're just trying to agree upon what the writing material is. The other thing I think that we can do theologically and as a church is, and you did it in the letter with the colleagues, to say that racism is a sin. And the other thing the church can does is to announce difficult truth. We've got some other truths that are less painful. And we're also in the business of saying forgiveness and redemption through Jesus Christ are real. So, you don't gut people on their sinfulness without also reminding them that redemption and transformation are what God in Christ are all about. In terms of the church, those are among the things that we can do uniquely. And we can't assume that everybody's going to come into a sanctuary to hear that. We got to figure out how to put that word out everywhere we go.
Yeah. One of the interesting things I've observed, and one of my young Black leaders helped me see this, is the number of white millennials that are protesting.
Yes.
And he said, "You know what? This is this is an evangelistic moment for us.
Yeah.
Here's an opportunity to do the Wesleyan thing of social holiness and personal piety. Get those things together and introduce these people to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so this is not all bad.
No. God is is in the middle of this, and these protests, these peaceful protests across the world, have more diversity in the aggregate than the average United Methodist Church in the United States. And in fact, those protests, by their makeup demographically, shame the church. And we have something to learn, not only about what they're saying about policy and practice, but about the togetherness of people across ethnicity, socioeconomics. They're age diverse. And I think it's fabulous and wonderful. Well, listen, you've been generous. You got a closing word you want to drop on West Ohio today?
Oh my. I give thanks to God for your Bishop, Gregory Palmer.
Oh, Lord.
That's my word.
Thank you.
You're a blessed conference to have this man as your leader. And I'm a blessed person to count him a friend. And I look forward to many more times when we can dialogue together. I wish you well in your virtual annual conference sessions and all that is before you. I pray that we can look back on this moment and say we were a part of something that made a difference in the world. And we were a part of the redemptive movement of God in this time. That's my prayer.
Thank you. I'm grateful for you, Bill McAlilly, and you're a friend and a brother. And I only have one regret, that we only tend to see each other framed around meetings, though we manage to spend time. We talk in text, and I've said to my wife, I say, if Bill and I lived within 2 hours of each other, it would be really dangerous. But if I had any hunger, it would be to live closer to close friends. And I count you among my close friends, man. The Lord be with you, friend.
And also with you. Bless you.
All right. Blessings.
Thanks for the time.
Thanks, man, for the conversation. I'm honored.